Hey guys, what's going on? Hermdo back with you. Hope you're having a good one. We're going to dive on into the Nick Fuentes on Piers Morgan interview. Got some timestamps picked out. Got all sorts of good stuff here as Nick and Piers go at it. Now here we go. We're going to dive into it around 13 minutes in. He's talking about, I guess he's kind of acute. Piers is going back and forth with Nick. And I guess there's a question about how is racism a product of your environment, or is it like some kind of a biological factor? Are you inherently racist? Is it something you pick up as you live throughout through your early stages of life, as your formative years? You grow up, you pick things up from other adults in your life. The question, nature versus nurture and whatnot, and the topic of Nick's parents gets brought up. It's kind of interesting here.
Or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot.
I always believe everybody's a product of their environment. Right? I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3, 4, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. It said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on that anecdote that you say on your own podcast, is do you think you grew up in a racist environment, that your father was inherently racist?
Some people, I've met people who you think would be racist as hell, and they turn out to be like the biggest libs you could ever imagine, depending on where they live, what their circumstances are. Everyone's different, like everyone comes from different walks of life. Some people's environments are different. But I've met people who I assumed were liberal as hell, who actually had a lot of biases, a lot of bigotry. You could say racism in certain regards and stuff like that. Sometimes you hear it. I heard it from some adults in my life. I remember I went down, my catalytic converter got cut into. It didn't get stolen, but somebody cut the pipe, and I remember the exhaust was really loud. I had to take it to get fixed, but I took it to this mechanic. He was close to Detroit, and I remember talking to the guy. He seemed like he was a really nice guy, but I remember we got on the topic. He's just like, "Oh, I bet the N-word stole that, right?" And I'm just like, "Holy cow, dude!" He was, every other word out of his mouth was the N-word. He was just going on and on and on about it. Great service. No, I mean, 5 stars. No, I'm just joking around. But he was a racist, too, because he probably saw that kind of stuff. He probably saw a lot of cars getting broken into. Being close to Detroit, he probably had a lot of stuff get stolen. He probably saw a lot of cars with, like, missing catalytic converters, That's just this kind of stuff that just abounds in areas like Detroit, and it kind of shapes your perceptions. You got some very liberal people who just don't see things that way. Like some people who do live close to diverse areas, and they, maybe they get their cars broken into, they get robbed or something, but they don't like condemn any race that would do that. They don't condemn anyone as a whole. They kind of just take it in stride. It's kind of like, how can you feel that way? How can you just, not really care about it, But some people pick this stuff up from their parents. Sometimes your parents have, biases, or they have bigotry or whatnot. My parents weren't like beautiful, wonderful, liberal people. Some people I knew, my grandfather on my mom's side, old school Polak, the guy fought in World War II. And I remember visiting him, when I was younger, and he always had some stories about the blacks, always had something going on. So you pick this stuff up from certain family members, certain environments, certain older people, the thing is with like millennials, like a lot of millennials, like, guys around my age or maybe a little younger, a little older, but we were told, racism was bad. That was slammed into our heads all throughout childhood and school, our formative years. We were told racism was bad, and I'm assuming like our children, Gen Alpha, we kind of, I don't want to say we forced it on them, but we did kind of imply a lot of ways, about how bad racism was and how, we should work, with other races. You should coexist with other races and whatnot. But, I don't know, because I think maybe some Gen Alpha, I'm sure a lot of Gen Alpha are in Nick's audience. Sometimes you kind of reject it because millennials' parents were racist. We rejected the racism. Now Gen Alpha's parents were anti-racist, and maybe they're embracing more racism. We know it's an issue among Gen Z. Nick has a huge audience. A lot of Gen Z guys are heading very quickly to the right. And yeah, there's a lot of factors that play: lack of opportunities, lack of money, lack of romantic, relationships and whatnot. And they think the right has answers for them. Gen Alpha might be in the same boat. As far as like Gen Z's kids, Gen Beta or whatever they're going to be called, who knows? Maybe they'll buck the trend. Maybe, I don't know. But we, in a certain way, I think Piers is right. We are like a product of our environment in some ways. We do pick this up, throughout our lives and whatnot. And some people reject it, some people embrace it. Just like, yeah, my daddy said not to trust those people. Or some people are like, yeah, I hate my parents because they were racist. It's all different. It's just kind of a mixed bag, really.
And that thought process moved to you.
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
Yeah, but he's not here to defend himself.
You are.
And my parents are.
You told the story.
And I will, and I'll defend them.
I'm not trying to ambush you. As I said at the start, Nick, to be clear.
No, it's not an ambush,
Nick,
but
to be clear,
I think everybody understands.
I'm not ambushing you. I'm literally reading an anecdote.
Okay, I got a comment here. It says, Morgan starts with the clearly incorrect premise of, I believe everybody's a product of their environment. But a minute later asks, do you believe your father was inherently racist? So which one is it, hereditary or environment? Hereditary for the father and environment for the son, That's an interesting point, kind of like as I touched on, where are people picking this stuff up from, It was one thing, back in the day, there wasn't really, YouTube when I was growing up. You learned a lot of this stuff from your parents. Now, kids are inundated with all this different kind of content from all over the net, all kinds of beliefs and religions and ideologies and all this stuff getting beamed into kids' heads, and whoever plays the game, the best, Nick is good at playing the game. He knows how to get eyes. He knows how to get clicks. He knows how to get clout and influence. And, a guy like Nick, he's a lot more influential than some of these people's, people probably aren't listening to their parents anymore. People are listening to guys like Nick Fuentes. That's the thing. Millennials, it was kind of different, as we grew up, as, YouTube became a thing. We were in our late teens, early 20s. And we had this whole new generation of like content creation. Millennials lived in both worlds. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're just straight up, just absorbing content. We didn't have that. When we were millennials, when we were like younger, it's a totally different dynamic.
You revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in the public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as, they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you. It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it, and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
Sure.
No, my parents are not racist, and they've never been racist. I'll tell you about my parents. They used to have a school in Chicago in the South Loop where they instructed people on how to shoot firearms. It was a security school, and most of the clients were black. And I believe actually one of their clients was Larry Hoover's son at one point, sort of a funny story. And so most of their clients would come in from the South side of Chicago. My grandmother, she grew up in the projects in the city. And so my family being in Chicago, being ethnics, being Italian, Irish, Mexican, and the West Side on Taylor Street, all over the city. My family for many generations have lived near and around black people. And look, my views about black people and their views about black people are shaped with experiences with black people. And what they will tell you, what my parents would say if they were here, is that for many, many years, the older generations of black people were very respectful, very humble, very decent. In fact, my grandma used to have an anecdote. She grew up in a lot of dysfunction. Her mother was mentally ill, and they would be having dinner in the projects, and there'd be so much chaos and dysfunction and disagreement and fighting. And she would look across the way out the window at a black family in the other apartment, and they'd be holding hands around the table saying grace. And this is sort of the culture that used to prevail. But now what you have in the city is that there's no accountability for the black people. And now Chicago has become a complete dump because these teenagers go out and they take over the city. They call them teen takeovers. That's the euphemism for it. They're teenagers, but they all come from the same neighborhood. They drive up there and they mug people and attack people and they destroy cars and destroy shops. We had the Festival of Lights a couple of weeks ago. It's supposed to be a family event.
Okay. Let me cut him off there. He kind of just goes on kind of a little tangent about, black people and stuff like that. But yeah, experiences do shape your perceptions. But yeah, I lived in Detroit for a number of years. I don't know if I ever brought this up really, but I did live in Detroit for a few years back in the early 2010s after my grandmother passed away. She had a home in Detroit. I moved there just basically to pay utilities and taxes on it, just because I didn't want it to get destroyed basically because there's plenty of houses in the neighborhood that, they got burned down or they got stripped out, whatnot. I didn't want that to happen to my grandmother's house. So I lived there for a number of years. And it didn't make me racist. Being in proximity to blacks didn't make me racist, but it did make me a realist in a way. It does make you more adept in kind of understanding, why black kind of are the way they are. Trying to phrase it in a sensitive way. But it's just like, you understand like the issues in these cities, in these communities, these are generational. And I remember talking, one of my neighbors was an elderly black guy, great guy named Thaddeus. He was in his 60s. Great dude, down-to-earth guy, just salt-of-the-earth guy, give you the shirt off his back. I talked to him many times, and, we talked about the city, we talked about, the community and whatnot, and he just, like, he was an old dude, and he's like, he didn't understand, like, the young guys, the way they acted. He was kind of ashamed of it, and it was just one of those things, sometimes like the older black generations look at the young black generations and they don't really know. And same thing with like me, I'm getting to an age, I'm going to be 40 in a month. I look at some of these young people, some of these young white people, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I look at Nick sometimes. I'm not much older than Nick, about 12, 13 years older than him, but I see the stuff comes out of his mouth, I'm just like, what the fuck, man? And the behavior of certain like young white guys, I'm just like, what the hell is this shit? I go on Twitter, I see the way they talk about women, I see the way they talk about minorities, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this? It kind of freaks me out a little bit. And yeah, there's all the slang and the skibbity riz and all that stuff. That stuff confuses the shit out of me too. But I'm getting to that age. I'm unk now. I'm a chopped unk. Hope that isn't a slur. But anyways, it's just the way there's a disconnect here, but like in these black communities, it's just like there's a generational disconnect there, and there's different influences and there's a lot of different factors. It's not just one thing. I mean, some people just say, well, it's just the biology, it's their IQs are too low, but there's a lot of other factors at play. There's the culture, there's the music, there's drugs, there's crime, guns, all sorts of stuff like that. There's illegitimacy, there's all sorts of problems like in the culture. I'm not coming down on blacks, of course I'm not. I'm trying to be, more constructive here, but it's just there's a lot of different factors at play in the black community, and getting exposure to that kind of stuff really does shape your perception. And I do have more empathy for blacks because of those experiences, but at the same time, as a white guy, as a working class blue collar slob, I don't know what I can do to help them, and it's a source of frustration for me. But I don't fall to hating them, but sometimes I kind of, you got to admit, like, hey, these problems, we got to address this shit somehow. And a lot of ways, I think Nick has frustrations with the left because the left wants to like absolve blacks of all responsibility and have no agency, no accountability and stuff. And I know I don't want to use the old boomer terms like, well, it's about, personal responsibility and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that kind of jargon plays well anymore, but I think the left's approach in dealing with issues in the black community is severely lacking, and maybe Nick Fuentes feels that same way too. But let's move on here. I've rambled on enough. Let's talk about Piers. He's talking about living in a big, diverse city. He's talking about demographics, kind of just making excuses for the demographics of London, which is a very diverse city. Hasn't always been, but it is now. And Piers seems to be unbothered by that, and he kind of challenges Nick here.
And I think anybody in Chicago would tell you the same.
I live in London. It's one of the biggest and most diverse cities in the world.
But it's not the same.
Well, actually, it's a big diverse city. The only difference is we don't have the gun violence because we don't have guns. That's a whole different story. I don't want to get into that with you. I have got into that before in America.
You got a knife problem. You got sword problems.
We have problems
with Aladdin.
We have problems with violent crime. I make no pretense of it. So the idea that somehow I'm cosseted in London because I'm not in Chicago.
I didn't say that.
Well, you kind of implied it. But I guess my point about the environment, I'm not saying you are a product of your environment. I'm saying most people are in some capacity. When I read that anecdote, which just to remind you, it's not something I have put out there. You told this story, right? And you said that
you said this. We're looping. You said this already.
But you haven't really directly, I think, responded to it, which is whether your father would not take you to certain restaurant chains.
Okay, this kind of go back, to kind of cycle back to like the father thing, but moreover, like talking about London diversity, some people love diversity. Some people think it's great. You go into a city, you go into a populated area, you see people of different races, different religions getting along, enjoying different meals, listening to different music, expressing their culture in different ways. And I think there is merits to diversity. I don't think diversity is necessarily a bad thing, but in some ways, it kind of, the culture becomes, the arguments from the right usually hinge upon like, okay, the white population is declining in this area. Here's why this is bad. And it's usually a lot of fear-mongering about immigration, fear-mongering about demographic replacement. The white genocide thing gets brought up a lot. And, I don't necessarily think the white genocide thing is really true. I think that's obviously it's a bad angle of attack. Somebody comes up to you, like some white guy comes up to you talking about white genocide. What are you going to think about them? I don't know. Maybe you agree with them. Maybe you're a right-winger watching this. You probably think I'm a cuck or something. But there's a lot of fear-mongering about demographic replacement happening in these cities. And there is crime issues in these cities. There is issues in London with, free speech and whatnot, free expression. That's all across the EU countries and what have you. There are things, we believe London is like a kind of a totalitarian place where the citizens are cracked down on and where criminals are allowed to do whatever they want, act with impunity and never face any kind of consequences for it. In some ways, there's the right-wing vision that, the fear-mongering vision, things are bad. I'm not saying necessarily, I'm not saying necessarily, I'm not a self-hating white. I don't think, chasing whites out of certain areas is going to fix everything, But there is like something to be said like about the culture of the area and how like maybe it like loses a little something the more diverse it gets, like its original charm, its original identity. That issues about identity and pertaining to race and culture and whatnot. In some areas, London was a very white area for a long time in World War II, and it's changed a lot in the last 60, 70 years. And some people think that's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. I don't want to sound like a fence rider here. I think there are merits, like I said, to like diversity and whatnot, but it does change the culture. It does change it. You feel like if you're white in London, you feel like a stranger in a strange land. And some people are okay with that, but there is something to be said. I think certain areas, maybe some, the thing is, it's just like, there's not, soon there's not going to be a lot of all white areas left. I'm not saying that to like, as a gotcha or something like that, but there'll be little white enclaves here and there. And these white areas, these certain white little cities all over the globe, like parts of America, parts of Europe and whatnot, there's a certain charm about them. There's a certain, like, something about them. It's just, it's nice. It's pleasant. There's definitely, I'm a person, I don't really agree with the idea that whites don't have culture. I think, white culture still exists in certain areas of the country and whatnot, but it's defined as like different things. But, like, the kind of traditional European cultures that existed in these areas are really no more. And that's what right-wingers decry a lot. You want to talk about white culture, go into a Culver's with only white staff and white customers. That's white culture right there. That's like walking through Valhalla. But we're losing that in a lot of ways. Nick is bringing that up a lot. He's bothered by that. He's very, very angry about that. But here we're going to go. Piers, as he does, he's got some gotchas for Nick.
Blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true.
What you
Everything I
expect
said
him to
in
say.
that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them?
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe
I got some stats here. One of these comments left some stats. And Piers and Nick kind of get into the per capita debate and whatnot. Well, Piers doesn't seem to really understand it, but this one comment here, Nick is right. According to Grok, so take it with a grain of salt, per year, 4% of the current U.S. black population commits a felony, as opposed to 0.074 for whites for felony charges, about half being committed in inner cities. Also, the odds a white person is a mass shooter is 1 in 633,000, or 0.000158 of the white population. The odds a black person is a felon is 1 to 25. White felons 1 to 135. So pure math, and according to statistics, black people commit felonies nationwide at a rate 5.4 times higher. Don't get mad at me, get mad at Grok. Well, there's some facts for you. There's some facts. I don't have time to fact check all this kind of stuff, but yeah, there is issues. You know, we're talking about we talked about the issues of the black community before. How do we exactly fix this? The right wing answer is just to imprison everybody. The left wing answer is just to let them do whatever the hell they want. I think, you know, I don't want to increase the carceral state. I think there is something when liberals talk, or like liberals, leftists talk about the school to prison pipeline. You know, I think that is an issue. We need more investment in these communities. We need more attention paid to these communities. But what works? But I'm just a white guy. I don't know. Hey, if you're black and you're watching this, you got any ideas? Hey, drop a comment down below. What do you think? How do you think we could best serve the black community to turn some of these trends around? Personally, I think, and we go back to the topic of family. Nick's family was brought up and stuff like that, and we discussed that briefly. But I think it starts in order to fix the issues in the black community, I think it starts with rebuilding the black family. Personally, 72% of black children are born out of wedlock. It's a huge, huge issue, and it's devastated the black community. It's a serious, serious problem. And I've had a lot of black people agree with me on this as well. You know, I have black friends. I can't be racist. No, I'm just being silly. But yeah, there's systemic generational issues in the black community that need to be addressed. But some people think, you know, we just call whites racist enough that it'll fix the problem. All this hinges on just whitey hating himself enough. Personally, I think there has to be some kind of contribution from blacks. Blacks have to want to improve their communities. And in some cases, on the outset, in some circumstances, some people, you know, maybe they just don't care. I hate to say it. There's plenty of instances of white people not caring as well. But, you know, if I have to give some tough love, you know, we need commitment. We need some kind of, you know, coming together, some kind of, you know, agreement between like different groups in this country. If we're ever going to get anywhere, if we could ever hope to achieve any kind of coexistence, we need to, you know, build forth towards that somehow. And I don't think Piers or Nick has the answers regarding that. That's just an aside there. But let's watch a little bit more of this.
Let's say that 5%.
Oh, so you're talking about black people who murder people?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't say that.
That's
You
the
just
crime
said
problem.
blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. You didn't clarify that you were talking about black murderers.
Right. No, you're right. That's a good addition to that. That's a great point.
Do you think it's funny, or
Yeah, I do. I think it's hilarious. I think it's totally true.
do you think a black American would find it funny? You think that blacks should be imprisoned for the most part?
Blacks are my biggest fans. I get high fives all the time. They say, Nick Fuentes, I love your show. They agree with me. And you want to know why? Here's the difference. Black people are the most victimized by other black people. You think black people want to live in the hood and the ghetto and get shot?
He's not wrong about that. And the reason, you know, a big reason we talk about, you know, minorities, you're victimized the most by your own group. You know, that's something, I mean, white people, I'm more likely to be victimized by another white person than a black person, well, depending on where I go. But the chances are, like statistics show, you're more likely to be attacked by a member of your own race, you know. And I think that explains why a lot of Hispanics broke for Trump, because a lot of them are victimized by illegal migrants. They live in the border towns and they get kind of fucked over by the illegal migrants, coming in there, especially under the Biden administration, where we kind of had like this open borders idea and whatnot. At least that's how some people perceived it to be. I think the Biden administration had a very lackluster, kind of lackadaisical attitude towards the border. I'm not saying it was open borders necessarily, but it definitely seems a lot more got let in. There was more entries, during the Biden administration than the Trump administration, definitely. Trump did, for all his faults, the one part of his promises he did fulfill was closing the border, and border crossings are way down under Trump. But yeah, but people in these border towns, Mexicans in these border towns, they get victimized by these people coming across the border a lot. There's white, talk about white on white crime, black on black crime. There's Hispanic on Hispanic crime as well, and we talk about that kind of stuff. But yeah, back to Nick's point, blacks do get victimized. It's blacks are more often to be a victim of other black people, and it's one of those things that we just gets papered over. Nobody talks about it. Even Family Guy had a bit about it. Cleveland Brown brought it up on an episode. It was kind of funny to see that kind of shit, but people just don't want to talk about these kind of issues in the black community. There's a lot of intra-racial strife and struggle. It's just like this idea. Some liberals, leftists have this idea of, once we get rid of whitey, everything's going to be good. But there's still plenty of intra-ethnic struggle and struggle between different minority groups. There's all sorts of ethnic chaos going on, regardless if whitey's engaged or not. But that's kind of just an aside. But yeah, I mean, Nick's not wrong here.
Not all the time. That's what happens in the south side of Chicago. You should come here. I'll take you there. We could go to Garfield Park.
My son
we could
went
go
to Chicago
Inglewood.
University for a year, actually, several years ago.
Yeah, that's a bubble. That's a bubble. You think you're in Chicago and Hyde Park? You don't know Chicago. Go a little bit west, see what it's like over there. And I'll tell you, black people agree with me because they're tired of it too. And maybe not most of them, but a lot of them agree with what I say about that because they know how it is. That's why the first thing they do when they make a little bit of money is they go and leave to another neighborhood.
Okay, so what was just
around.
remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No. Less than 1 in 100 black U.S. men commit murder. That's the most up-to-date crime statistics in America.
That's not true. I've seen other statistics. They say 1 in 20 will eventually commit a murder.
So your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to look this up myself. Let me do some quick Googling. What percentage of black men commit crime? Let's see if Google will. What percentage of black men have been convicted from a crime? We estimate 3% of the total U.S. adult population and 50% of the African American adult male population have ever been to prison. People with a felony convictions account for 8% of adults and 33% of African American adult male population. Wow. Jeez Louise. Here we go. We get Reddit here. Let's talk about Reddit. How accurate and reliable is the claim that other African Americans commit more crime than other races? Skepticism in arrest incident data is fair, but victimization data, like the National Crime Victimization Survey, victims surveyed report being victimized by black folk at a disproportionately high rate, 30%, are uncomfortable facts, of course, ones that we should not shy away from, particularly since black folk are much more likely to be homicide victims. Okay, Reddit backs up what Nick's saying. Okay, black men commit murder. We got the Federal Bureau of Investigation here. Black or African American, 2 million total murder, negligent manslaughter, 4,935 total arrest race. So you have violent crime, 153,000. But you look at the white numbers are higher here, but that's because whites are a higher percentage of the population. Blacks are 13% of the population. Whites are about 58% of the population. But yeah, the per capita statistics, I'm going to declare that Piers doesn't really know what he's talking about here. But let's move on from this. We talk about Piers is talking about mass shootings.
How do you feel about mass shootings at school?
I think they're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's
schools?
white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
what proportion?
I'm curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether you're
1 in 633,000. If we go back, if we're trusting Grok on this, I don't know. I'm kind of
your advice would be
maybe a little skeptical. I don't know. I'm just saying take everything with a grain of salt, but that's the numbers I'm getting.
to people who have kids
Wait,
in
is
these
my
schools.
mic working?
What
proportion?
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60-65% of school shootings by white people.
You're telling me what proportion?
And Pierce is out of his depth here. Nick has got him by the balls here. This is pretty bad. You know,
Proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb or are you just not that
What
smart?
difference does
What's
that
the
make
difference?
to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, that's all Pierce has. It's the same shit from the liberal, anti-MAGA, anti-men, whatever, anti-misogyny playbook. This is the same thing. The feminists are doing this shit. All he has is guilt and shame. What about the children? What about the victims? I'm not saying that shouldn't be considered, of course, but that's all Piers has. That's all Piers has. It's just like, come on, dude. Piers is dodging. Obviously. I got to hand it to Nick. Nick's got him by the balls here. It's just like, what percentage of the actual white population commits these mass shootings? Piers has got nothing. He's got nothing. This is bad.
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is
what I'm saying to you is by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, it's just not livable.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same for black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the
are
population.
you hearing it? No.
See,
What's the proportion?
Pierce can't understand. He cannot understand per capita. He cannot. This is pathetic. Let's skip ahead a few seconds.
And when you're confronted with reality, you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings?
He's asked this question like he's brought this up for the last 4 minutes. Piers has not answered. What's he going to say now? What's Piers going to say now? How's he going to dodge the question now?
With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both black and whites, the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No, tell me the number.
But yeah, looking at the population differences, we talked about this. 13% of the population versus 60% of the population. Something like, well, is there like 250 million whites? What's the percentage? Hold on one second. Let me do some Googling here. Percentage of U.S. population that is white. Okay, here we go. 59.8% black population. There's approximately 200 million white people, about 40 million black people. So it's non-Hispanic whites. You know, we mix that in. There's some Hispanic whites and whatnot. We could discuss that at another point. But yeah, Piers is out of his element here. He doesn't understand the proportionality, doesn't understand per capita, how an increased crime rate from a smaller population is indicator of a bigger problem than a similar crime rate among a larger population, a much larger population. Piers is not understanding this at all.
And yet, the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial.
That's one of those things. If I'm just being honest, and I know I'm going to piss off leftists or liberals or whatever, but that's a feeling a lot of people have. If you ask a white person, you know, some people will probably be dishonest about it, but, you know, it's like an innate thing white people have. If we pass black people on the street, we get a little bit nervous. I hate to say it. I hate admitting to it. You know, if I'm walking, if it's nighttime and there's a black guy walking to me, I get a little nervous. I'm sorry. But it's something with, you know, it goes back, a lot of times it goes back to the behavior and stuff like that. People want to act about like genetics and whatnot like that, but you know, a lot of times it's just like it's the reputation that kind of precedes them. It's the issues here. I hate admitting it. You know, please don't think I'm racist or anything like that, but you know, a lot of people will admit to you, like, yeah, they get a little nervous. They don't want to live around blacks. They don't want to be around blacks in certain areas, but you know, it's just the thing. You know, people, it's something we have to contend with. So it's something we have to work with. It shouldn't be like that. We should be able to, you know, cross anybody on the street without having any kind of fear. You know, we should be able to all, you know, coexist and all that happy, crappy liberal stuff. But, you know, the thing, Piers is still stuck in this mindset. He's not able to answer Nick. He's just going back and forth and just dodging the question and whatnot. But here we go. Let's skip ahead a little bit. We've been talking about this for a few minutes. Let's talk about, apparently he wants to play a clip. Piers Morgan calls this uncensored. There it is right there. But apparently he won't play a clip from Kanye West.
Show.
How many are black?
The honesty.
How many of your friends are black?
Many of them, like at least a dozen.
Apparently he cuts out when he asks Nick what Ye said. Nick responds, and they cut it out.
Wow.
Ye being one who you know, Sneeko being another who you also know.
Yeah. And so how do they feel when you say you just want to be away from any black people, walk away from them?
Well, you know what Ye told me? I'll tell you verbatim what he said. That it doesn't come from.
Oh, come on, Nick. No, apparently he said something like N-word on N-word or whatever. Obviously, Piers is not going to air that kind of shit. I just think that's very funny. That's very funny. But it keeps going on here. Oh, Lord, that was bad look for Piers. That's a bad look for Piers. But here we go on to some Holocaust discussion.
Do you think?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I do because I just find it extraordinary that you would think the Holocaust could ever be something that we could joke about.
Why, too soon?
Oh, shit. I'm sorry, but that's funny. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jews. Sorry to my kosher friends, but that's funny.
Is it too soon to make jokes?
How many people do you think died in the Holocaust? How many Jewish people?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 7 million. What's the number? 6 million, something like that.
So you
8 million?
You concede that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust?
Possibly more. Possibly, we're discovering all the time. So it could maybe even be more than that.
So why have you doubted the numbers in the past?
I'll tell you why. I really think that every death is a tragedy, however many Jewish people died in the Holocaust. And I'm not a World War II historian, so I'm actually open to believing the official narrative, and I've read some of the conspiracy theories. And to tell you the truth, it's a rigorous debate. But what's interesting about this is in many countries, it's not even legal to talk about it. And that's really where my interest in the Holocaust begins and sort of ends, to tell you the truth, is that if you wanted to question the number, you would be put in jail in about, 17 or 18 European countries. And I think that's really the more interesting conversation, which is that this is almost like a religious dogma in the West. No other genocide, no other atrocity is treated like this. Could you imagine if in the United States they said the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza is 100,000, and if you don't say that, you're going to jail, you're banned on X, you can't have a job? That's the part that's totally insane. And a lot of people, they can't even make up their minds. I think it's actually done a disservice. If your goal, and I'm not saying you as Piers Morgan, but if your goal, if you're an advocate for awareness about this, if your goal is to convince everybody that this is the way the Holocaust happened, I think the last thing you'd want to do is say that everyone that disagrees is in jail and is banned and you're not allowed to.
There is something about it. Now, I don't want to traipse into that territory. I have to walk very carefully around this kind of stuff but the very fact we do have to speak carefully and walk on eggshells around this topic is kind of a testament to, the kind of power this narrative has over people and whatnot, and, why we're not allowed to question the official narrative. I don't want to get into that. Honestly, call me a pussy or whatever, but that's some dark territory right there, getting into like that Holocaust denialism and stuff like that, or just like, but I think it's fair. There's plenty of other genocides that have taken place throughout history. The genocide in Rwanda, what happened, the Holodomor, there's plenty of other, there's plenty of other instances of humans mechanically exterminating each other but in the tune of millions of people. There's all sorts. So look what the Bolsheviks got up to, with Russian Christians and whatnot. But it's just this whole thing, but the one thing you're not allowed to question is the Holocaust. And people are like, what's the deal with that? What's the aura? What's the reputation of this event? Why is it, held in like so sacrosanct and whatnot? People are going to be asking this kind of stuff. We'll get into it kind of later, just kind of, you could tell there's a concerted effort from like certain groups of people to keep this mythology going surrounding this happening, and, the struggles they have trying to get younger generations to care about these kind of narratives surrounding World War II and whatnot. When a lot of young people think Hitler's cool, think Hitler had aura, think he had skibbity riz or what have you, and a lot of issues certain communities are having keeping these narratives going, for younger generations of Americans and whatnot.
Say it.
But here, let's skip ahead a little bit. We get into, you can hear Piers talking to his editors or his producers or whatever, talking to his crew about pulling up more clips to get on Nick Fuentes, to ambush Nick Fuentes with here.
Both sides of the issue. And honestly, unfortunately, it's hard to judge because there has never been.
Yeah, he just said, "Where's the Hitler?" Yep, there it is right there.
There's never been a debate on it. And there's never been a debate because of the stigma, because of the censorship. And I think that leads a lot of people to say, well, what do they have to hide? Because you can say on your show, well, I'm personally against Holocaust denial.
Skip ahead.
I don't know any right-minded person who believes that Jewish people weaponized the Holocaust for their own personal get-out-of-jail-free or whatever you called it.
You don't know anyone that does that? That believes that?
I'm sure there are some people that do that, but it's such a ridiculous generalization. The truth is that most Jewish people have lost relatives in the Holocaust. In fact, I want to play you two clips. One is where you talk about Adolf Hitler.
Let's skip ahead. Oh, yeah, no, let's watch this.
Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's like, well, he was also really fucking cool. So, time to grow up. We're not children anymore. Am I right?
Yikes.
Am I right? Am I right, boys? Am I right? Let's go. He was also really fucking cool.
You regret saying that?
Saying a fact? No, that's absolutely
shit.
true.
You think Hitler was very fucking cool?
This whole thing, just constantly beating people over the head with this World War II stuff, with Hitler and stuff, man, it's just the generational divide is so present here. And, Piers, he styles himself as like this anti-woke kind of center guy who's like a moderate dude, but he doesn't like the crazy loony liberals. He's always going out with the loony liberals, but he still uses this framing to attack people like liberals and leftists do about Hitler and whatnot. The same kind of hysteria surrounding this guy and how we've had to talk about, Hitler's pretty much been mainstreamed in American consciousness for the last 10 years, and we just keep reverting back to the guy. Everyone that does something bad is Hitler. Trump is Hitler. Trump's crew is Hitler. Stephen Miller's Hitler. Steve Bannon's Hitler. Alex Jones is Hitler. Nick Fuentes is Hitler. Everybody's Hitler. The whole thing goes back again and again. But Piers actually brings up a Holocaust survivor, and he actually plays some clips of him.
Let's just take what Danny said here.
Hi Piers, it's Danny Finkelstein here. As you're interviewing Nick
Danny Finkelstein, oh my lord.
Fuentes, you might try suggesting to him that he reads my book, Hitler, Stalin, Mum and Dad. It's called Two Roads Home in the United States. Since he says he's on Team Hitler, you might like to ask him about the fact that Hitler arrested my mum, tried to starve my mum.
Okay, we don't need to watch it. We've heard plenty of this stuff. We've heard plenty of guys talking about this kind of stuff, but it just, oh Lord. Now let's get into Piers. This whole thing, beating people over the head. But this is the thing, this dude here, I'm not saying he didn't suffer. I'm not saying what happened to him wasn't horrible and stuff like that. But that's the thing. Nick doesn't care. Nick is riding this shit. Yeah, you have a whole new generation that doesn't care about the mythology surrounding the Holocaust, and that's seriously an issue. And they're putting Holocaust memorials in Fortnite now to try to get young people to understand like the evils of Hitler and stuff. They're really pulling out all the stops because they're worried that the younger generations are skewing so right that they don't care about that kind of stuff anymore. And Piers is talking about like, I can't believe you would think anybody would weaponize the Holocaust. And, maybe some people do. But let's skip ahead. I guess Piers is accusing Nick of being a grifter here.
But when you say something like what you just said...
I'm banned from banking. I'm banned from banking and credit cards. You know who you're talking to? I do it for money.
And by the way,
how much money you make? Your company's worth $100 million. Your company's worth $100 million. I was banned from Bank of America.
And you shouldn't
I'm
have
banned
been.
from processing credit cards.
And you shouldn't have been.
But I am. So don't tell me I'm doing it for money.
Well, ask me my opinion about that. I'll tell you shouldn't have been. Right? I don't agree with that. What happened to you?
Then don't say I'm doing it for money, because you know that full well, and you say it's a grift.
How much money
if I wanted to be a grifter, I'd be like you, and I would go and say,
how much money are you making?
I'm making a lot of money now.
Yeah.
Now that I'm the #1 live streamer in America, because people agree with me more than they agree with you. We're tired of hearing about slavery and the Holocaust and Jim Crow. We're done hearing about that.
Yep, he's right. The Piers is just, he's a stale, out of touch. He's 60 years old. He's pretty much on the cusp of being a boomer. And that's the thing. These older generations just don't get. They don't get how, like I said earlier, I don't understand how these younger generations believe this stuff. But then again, I'll admit, I'm old. I'm out of touch. I don't get how they believe in this kind of stuff. I can kind of understand, when you get, the left just beats you over the head with these kind of narratives so often, deploy these tactics of just calling you a fascist and trying to ruin your life over like racist accusations. So often they go back, they default to this thinking so often. And the culture, the pendulum has swung so far left in the last 10 years. And, left and right, back and forth, but our culture is still a very left-wing culture in a lot of ways. And a lot of people, a lot of prominent leftists in our culture still deploy these tactics. And these young people, everybody under the age of 30 is totally and completely rejecting this kind of stuff, and it's something older people have to contend with. You can't be doing the same guilting, shaming routine anymore. You've been doing it for 10 years. It has resulted in nothing. It's resulted in 2 Trump terms and an entire generation of young men skewing so far to the right, they're actually sanitizing the image of Hitler. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely crazy how far we've gone, and that's a serious problem. Some people see it as a problem, but I don't know where else you thought this was going to go. You keep guilting and shaming these people. You keep demonizing white men. What do you think they're going to do? They see the path set forth in front of them by liberalism, and they reject that shit, where they'll be guilted and shamed and treated like second-class citizens. They see the right. They see all this stuff that exalts white men, that tells white people that they should have a future and they should have a culture and they should have interests and they should have a country. They're going to go for that. And what's the message to these young white men? Stop being racist or I'll call you Hitler. Good luck. Piers got nothing. Piers has got nothing here. But let's skip ahead here. And Piers is still using the same old tactics.
You say women are annoying, so therefore, what's the incentive? We have to do it in spite of the fact that they are annoying. We have to do it in spite of the fact that they talk too much. We can get them to lose weight. We can put them on peptides. We can get them to the promised land. But it's going to be
Do you think this view of women may
meantime.
be why none of them want to go near you?
Oh, you should see my DMs. It is quite the opposite. They're called the Groy bets, and I'm actually batting them away. Granted, not all of them are attractive. Some of them are attractive.
Are
but
you actually?
you'd be
Look, just to
very
clear
wrong
up,
about that.
one of the many theories about you. I've no idea what the answer is, and you haven't got to answer. But are you actually attracted to women?
I am attracted to women.
You're not gay.
No, but I
He had to think for a second there. Ooh, who's shipping Nick Fuentes?
will say that women are very difficult to be around.
Okay.
So there's that.
And do you think they should have the right to vote?
I do not. No, absolutely not.
They should stay at home.
I could guilt and shame Nick over this. Oh, how dare you, Nick? But what's the point? Why resort to those tactics anymore?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
So basically, you're just a misogynist old dinosaur, aren't you? For a young guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm the
Yeah.
boomer. I know I'm the boomer here, but actually, you're a 27-year-old dinosaur, aren't you? Aren't you, Nick Fuentes? All women.
I am.
All women are annoying.
This whole thing, Nick Fuentes, one thing I'll say, he's kind of taken the stink off of like inceldom, remaining celibate for a long time. I guess you could consider it like voluntary celibacy at some point. I'm sure Nick could bed down any number of women. I'm not saying that because I'm like a Nick Fuentes fan or anything, but the thing is, I mean, the women do like what he has to say. Women gravitate towards him. There's a lot of young women are rejecting feminism, and they're like, hey, we should be at home. Here's a comment here from a young lady. I'm a woman, and I think we should be at home raising our children instead of daycares. Okay. All right, sweetheart. But yeah, a lot of women are rejecting this too. You can't discount. There's a not inconsiderable amount of women that are kind of rejecting these narratives, they're hating the men and whatnot. And a lot of men, but the thing is, a lot of men, this mainstreamed like misogyny stuff, Nick says a lot of very critical, very harsh things about women, but also a lot more guys are like proud to be incels now. It's kind of crazy. It used to be a point of shame. If you weren't getting laid, I'm a millennial. I remember back in my 20s, if you weren't getting laid, like if you graduated high school a virgin, you were a serious loser. There was something seriously wrong with you. Now people are like, they're like in their 20s, they're virgins, and they're like proud of it. It's crazy, this whole celibacy thing. And yeah, the divide between the sexes is very great. There's people get the ick. There's all sorts of standards men have to keep up with. But yeah, I mean, the things men say about women are god awful too. Yeah, women are crazy, men are crazy. There's this big generational divide in Gen Z. A lot of like Gen Z women are dating older guys. A lot of Gen Z guys are dating older women. It's crazy. It's this whole thing going on now. This whole idea about pair bonding, relationships, family formation, it just kind of goes out the window. But Nick kind of headed that off. He's kind of riding the whirlwind of this kind of like anti-sex, anti-women sentiment. He's kind of carrying it forth, It's kind of crazy to see, this guy where all this stuff winds up. But personally, I think it's fucked up. I mean, I think, not to sound like a right winger, but I think we should be concerned about, birth rates and marriage rates and whatnot. Those are things that are like key to keeping this country afloat. And a lot of people think we can just, import a bunch of immigrants to make up the difference, but I don't think that's an answer either. So, but the thing is that is a kind of a conundrum Nick has to face. Piers, maybe he got him a little bit here, talking about like how Nick isn't married and whatnot, and just it's the stuff like that. Just like, you can't really save the white race if you're not having white kids, or whatever it is that Nick purports to believe in. I'm not sure at this point, but there is some conflicting points of his ideology with Nick. Some of the stuff he says makes little sense to me. I'm not sure where he's going. Some of his ideology seems to be kind of all over the place. But with this woman stuff, he seems to be pretty straight and narrow. Like, yeah, women are bad, relationships are bad, sex bad, that's the kind of thing. But, I mean, at least if nothing else, maybe you could argue he's trying to be more discerning that men shouldn't settle for certain women, or men should expect more from women, or women should expect, or they should lower their expectations as well. The whole 6-pack, 6 inches, 6 figures thing, It's just crazy. It just the war between the sexes just continues on, and Nick is riding that whirlwind, man.
All women grow old. They all get fat. Says the guy. Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Says the guy who's never got laid. Wow.
That's the thing, though. You boomers, it's
you think
always
you're an expert
get laid,
in women,
free love.
given you've never got laid?
Yeah, we are going back to the Stone Age. You're absolutely right. This. You're talking about empathy and your kids are empathetic and they would never laugh at a joke about the Holocaust and you're a misogynist. You're a simp yourself. You're totally henpecked. That's the problem. So we are going back to the way
another clip of yours about women.
A lot of women want to be raped. And when I say raped, I mean like...
Jesus.
That sounds bad when I say it like that. But there's like a lot of women that really want a guy to beat the shit out of them. But also, they have to pretend, but part of it is they have to pretend like they don't.
You think women want to be raped, do you?
Jesus Christ.
That's what the studies show, Piers. That is what these statistics say.
But that's what you believe,
They have
is it?
fantasies. They have
Jesus Christ.
fantasies about it. I don't think that they want to actually get raped, but there is a study out there. Get ready for this. It says 62% of women have rape fantasies. And if you read anything that they're reading, if you watched what they're watching, what do you think 50 Shades of Grey is about? What do you think Twilight is about? I mean, that's just true.
You think women want to have the shit beaten out of them, as you said?
Yeah, and it's very disturbing, but it's true.
I mean, Piers keeps going for this line of attack. The shame, guilting, shaming thing, the same, like, ambush tactics and stuff. It's just not working anymore. Nick is like unashamed about this. I think what Nick says is abhorrent, but it's just like he doesn't care about it. You can't. Like I said, it's the generational divide. I'm kind of between these guys in age, and it's just like maybe I don't share either of their sensibilities. Really, I think Nick is way too extreme. I think Piers is just using the wrong tactics. But this kind of stuff this resonates with the young guys, man. Nick is like the Pied Piper of this shit. It's kind of crazy to see how it's gotten to this point, but Nick is just forcing this issue, and it just keeps going and going. It's crazy. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know what to make of this I don't know how you get to this point, but I mean, Jesus Christ. But, me, I'm not even going to bother. Believe whatever you want to believe. Say whatever you want to say. Whatever you say, at least own it. And Nick is owning it. I'll give him that.
Do you think your views on women might change if you actually ever had a relationship with one or had sex and actually had a proper relationship? I mean, people say the reason you're so angry about women is you're basically an incel.
Well, I'm not angry about it.
You sound very angry. You sound very, very angry about women.
I'm passionate. It's an issue. I'm passionate.
That's the thing. People say, you hear this on Twitter a lot, just, oh, you're mad online, all this shit. It's like having passion instead of just being some nihilist douchebag and just like stuffing all your emotions back down and just having this like ironic sheen to everything, couching everything in irony, like not caring about stuff, being this like weird chic nihilist or whatever you want to call it. That shit's cringe. That's like a millennial leftist thing. That's going away. We're bringing sincerity back. Nick is bringing sincerity back. He believes what he has to say.
about.
You're sounding
He cares about stuff.
very bitter about women, as if women have done a terrible disservice to you. But when you don't have relationships, you don't have sex, when are they doing these terrible things to you that's made you so hateful towards women? I'm really curious.
Was that? I don't think that was a hateful clip. I think I was laughing. I said they want men to beat the shit out of them, and that's just true. I mean, when you look at the state of modern women, all they do is lay in their bed, doom scroll.
All these comments are just like taking Piers apart, man. This is brutal.
They're chilling out. They're getting a little. Look, they're getting a little fat. It is what it is. I don't know what the average weight is, but they're getting a little heavy. And any guy that
Some of this stuff does smack of like closeted homosexuality and stuff. Not the fun kind of gay, like my mom says yay, but just like this really angry, like resentful kind of incel shit. But I don't know. It's marketable. Nick's pushing this shit. What am I gonna do? I mean, that's all I've been heard my life as a millennial. Just like get laid, get laid, get laid. You know, people are just not falling for that shit anymore. I mean, what worked on millennials is not working on Gen Z, and the people who were insulting millennials originally just can't get that through their heads. You know, it's a different thing. But let's skip ahead a little bit.
Oh, that's what you do. You could be Pope because you're celibate.
That's true. And I'm also from Chicago, like the Pope. But look,
Right.
I mean, women, it says in the Bible that women have no authority over men, and they can't teach men. And that's why there's no female priests.
There's a lot of
So I
things
don't
in the
think
Bible.
the Catholic-
I mean, do you take every
Okay.
word of the Bible as sacrosanct?
Well, yeah, it's inspired scripture.
That's all of
But I
it
mean,
is
is this now
all of it is
the
sacrosanct.
theological?
I think this atheist thing, I don't know. Every time I think atheism is dying, it kind of rears its ugly head again. But I think it's like pop Reddit, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, rational atheist, like atheism plus feminism, whatever bullshit. I have to believe at some point it's dying off and more people are like gravitating towards Christianity or other forms of faith. I have to believe at some point, you know, we're just going to see an end to this kind of shit, this kind of cynicism in regards to religion. We're being more sincere. We're being more sincere. Like I said earlier, you know, there's not much irony in what Nick has to say. You know, he's going full force at it, you know. It's kind of crazy. But, yeah, let's listen to what the rest of Nick has to say here. He goes on for a little bit.
Debate. Well, it is Catholic doctrine that women should not lead and teach. I mean, you're not interacting with what I'm saying. Why can't women be priests?
There should be.
Okay, well, you're not Catholic. That's not a Catholic
I am
position.
a Catholic. Many things I disagree with the Catholic Church.
Okay. Well, that kind of is contrary because the whole basis
really?
of being Catholic is
No.
accepting. It's accepting the
a
authority
member,
of the pontiff.
You can be a member of a religion and disagree with parts of that religion. Perfectly reasonable.
You could be, well, yeah. I mean, you could say
Unless you're an
that, but it wouldn't
extremist.
be true.
If you're an extremist, you can't.
Okay.
Obviously, you never deviate.
That's just not rigorous.
You never
That's just
deviate if
sloppy.
you're an extremist. But even the Constitution,
sloppy.
even the Constitution's been amended. Was it 27 times? People talk about this sacrosanct document. It's it's been amended 27
Oh my
times.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my, this is not rigorous intellectually. This is very
Just
this is
a statement of
tabloid
fact.
theology. Okay, but it's fine. Where were we? We're talking about Trump.
I mean, you got Piers. Piers is like stuck in 2015, man. We're moving past all this shit now. All the stuff about like, you know, racism shaming, that's going away. All the stuff about like religion shaming, that's going away. All the stuff about like sex shaming, that's going away. I mean, Piers is using all these tired tactics that, you know, woke libs have employed since the days of like Gamergate. It's over, man. It's over. I mean, Piers wants to be anti-woke, but he still uses the woke framing. It's over, Piers. Move on. Nick is like the anathema to this, whether you like it or not. I'm not the biggest fan of it myself, but, you know, it's just, it doesn't, it's changing now. The world is changing now. It's getting to be an uglier, strange place now. But let's move on to the last couple of minutes of this.
Don't know you very well will have been shocked in parts and surprised in other parts. But in totality, they can see you for what you are. I think we've got a lot nearer to what the real Nick Fuentes is in the last 2 hours than we probably have seen from your other recent interviews. Would you agree?
No, I mean, the clip thing, we've done the clip thing. We've all seen the clip show. Everyone's seen the clips. You think you're the first one to do the ADL rap sheet. So here you said this, and then here you said that. I've been playing that game for 10 years. So this is honestly more of the same, to tell you the truth.
Nick Fuentes, I appreciate you coming on Uncensored. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, my thanks to Nick Fuentes, and my thanks to the hundreds of thousands of you watching this special live episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored.
This has 3.6 million views in like 2 days, not even. It's pretty crazy the kind of coverage this kind of shit gets. It's insane how much play this got. It has it has 73,000 comments and growing. People are really incensed about this kind of stuff. People are pissed off about this kind of stuff, but man, it shows me there's the old media class, the old pundit class, all these guys like Piers Morgan and Bill Maher and all these guys who style themselves as kind of being like anti-woke libs, but they still use like liberal framework. The whole thing, it's just not working anymore. They have no answer for Nick. Nick is ascendant, Nick is the new media. As much as we hate to admit it, as much as we fight against it, I got tons of issues with Nick, but I'll admit, he's got that reach. He's got that audience. Nobody cares what millennials think anymore. I might as well be Piers Morgan. I might as well be one of these boomers in the media trying to shame Nick using these old liberal tactics that are ineffective. But I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you watch this long, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you guys later.